to the average American, Bavarian food is German food. When Americans think of German foods, they think of Biergarten and Oktoberfest or a pretzel. Berliners eat pretzels, but they're terrible. We don't even celebrate Oktoberfest. That's a purely Bavarian thing.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Matt Rodbard. To many, German food is humble comfort food, the kind of food that may not win a beauty award, but more than makes up for it with its power to soothe, nourish, and cheer. In her latest book, Classic German Cooking, author Luisa Weiss has collected and mastered the essential everyday recipes of Germany and Austria. In this terrific conversation, Luisa shares her personal connection to German cooking while shattering some myths about one of the world's great cuisines. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Luisa Weiss, welcome to This is Taste. How are you?
Thank you. I'm well, thanks.
It's great to meet you. I've known your work for a long time and just really admired you. And I have to say, I just think this book is so terrific. It's one of my favorite of the season. I'll say a few things. First, it's so well researched. You've clearly done the work. You've traveled throughout Germany. You've interviewed historians and chefs, and you really have a grasp of how history and recipe come together, but also the deep bench of recipes in this book is tremendous. I want to make many of them. I am puzzled by some of them. We'll get to that, but thank you for doing it.
Oh, thank you so much. It's really kind. And yeah, I'm happy that it's having such resonance.
Before we get into German cooking and your terrific book, Classic German Cooking, I want to ask you about your career before that, your life as a literary scout. We have a ton of bibliophiles listening to this show, and I love to get into what is a literary scout and who were you discovering?
So literary scouts are basically spies. That's how I call them. They're literary spies. They're little agencies that operate on behalf of foreign publishers looking for books to translate and publish abroad. So, for example, the agency that I worked for, which was Bettina Schrewe Literary Scouting, we had a number of different clients all over the world, one of which was Bertelsmann, Germany. And it was our job to sort of network with our agents and editor acquaintances here in New York to find new manuscripts and as yet unknown books to sort of read overnight and then write reports on and urge our foreign clients to publish.
Oh my gosh, I think that you probably could write a book about a literary scout in a mystery setting too. But like you talk about reading books in a day and processing it. How did that work? And how were you, like, what was your instinct to say this is the next big thriller or next big romance, et cetera, et cetera?
I always say that job was my ideal job. And even at the time that I was doing it, I knew that nothing would really ever be better than that because I was basically being paid to read books that I would have been reading anyway. And as for how did we know whether a project was particularly well suited to a market, I mean, a little bit is an experience. Of course, we knew our clients' lists and we understood what kinds of books they were looking for, but also just like instinct, just like an editor has an instinct for a project, scouts have that same instinct. And there's just something it's not really tangible always, but something about a particularly amazing book, even if it's unedited and even if it's partial, that just like lights your hair on fire. Yeah. And that feeling is what we chased all the time.
Oh my gosh. And it was a rare feeling. Were there any authors this is time to name drop. We're going to do that. Like, are there any authors they discovered who we might know?
I mean, The Kite Runner is the one that is the book that is the most sort of lodged in my memory because I got it like secretly from some contact. I can't even remember who. And I actually was told I was sent home early and I sat on my sofa and I read the entire manuscript in 4 hours. And at the time, it had a different ending. The ending was changed for publication, which I have always thought was sad. But that book just like grabbed me by the scruff of my neck. And that's kind of the one but there were so many.
So many.
I did it for 5 years. So.
Oh my gosh, what a job. I think we're all kind of a little jealous. We get to read so many so many manuscripts before they're known. Speaking of editing and your instinct as an editor, you were a cookbook editor as well, which you worked at Stewart, Tabori, and Chang, which is a terrific, or was a terrific publisher. Talk about some of the work that you did there and some of the authors you worked with.
So Stewart, Tabori, and Chang was an illustrated book imprint of Abrams, and the cookbooks that I worked on really ran the gamut. There was Alton Brown and Jacques Torres, who were sort of more food world people, and then also people like Leanna Krisoff and Kim Boyce, who were sort of, I don't know, those are the books that I have just I've always loved so much. And it was such an amazing experience to get to work with both types of books, some that, ones that were really well, like publicized. High profile, exactly. And others that were a passion project, but that I really think have stood the test of time.
It's great. So what did you take away from editing cookbooks, and what did you enjoy about that process?
I mean, editing cookbooks is great because you get to see the entire process, like how the sausage is made. And as a complete cookbook obsessive, I mean, really just obsessive. I read them in bed. I follow them like other people follow sports teams. I mean, I just think cookbooks can be such an incredible gateway into cultures and people's minds and moments in time and things like that. It was just really great to see how they get made and to be sort of the integral person pushing them along, making them the best possible product they could be.
I love that sentiment. I think I share that love of just the process and pushing it along. So many elements. We'll have one of our editors on the show in the next couple months. I'm planning on having somebody on, so we'll get more into that. So stay tuned for that. On to classic German cooking. You write in the intro, Germans can be much more carefree and twinkly-eyed than they are often given credit for. Really stuck with me. And for a culture that is legend for efficiency and some may say general coldness, how is this true, and how does this sentiment relate to the food?
The stereotype, right, is that Germans are these highly efficient, cold-blooded creatures. And of course, their history plays an outsized role in this. But the truth is that nowadays, German efficiency is a thing of the past. Ask any German desperately waiting for their train from the Deutsche Bahn if they still believe in German efficiency, and the answer is a resounding no. So the efficiency is largely a myth at this point. And Germans are, somebody explained it to me once. They said Germans are like a coconut. They're super hard on the outside and liquid on the inside. And when I heard that, I was like, yes, that's it. Because Germans are quite, formal and cold at the beginning. But when a German lets you into their life, they will die for you. I mean, the level of loyalty and deep friendship that Germans feel once they've let someone in is really like lifelong. And I feel like that doesn't get a lot of attention.
I think.
And when it comes to food, it's a funny place. Like, when you go to a butcher in Germany to buy, salami or meat or whatever, the butchers always give a child that's with you a sausage, just like a cold sausage. And it's just part of the culture. You don't go into a butcher shop without the butcher giving your kid a free sausage. Or like at the doctor's office, often the doctors will give the kids lollipops. Like, it's just I don't know. It's just it's a very sort of sweet, gentle way of dealing with food and children. And
yeah, well, we'll talk more about some of the additional stereotypes around it and how you smash them in this book. And my grandmother was born in Munich, and my whole family going back is from there. And I think thinking about what you just said made me think about Grandma Gert a little bit, and how, yes, a rigid person to many. Very, very German, but certainly very loving and sweet in the inside. So I love that. You've really shown me a little bit more about my grandma, so I appreciate that. This nugget really stuck out, and really your book is full of history and drawing parallels between ancient history and more modern history with foodways. And in the 18th century, Friedrich II co-signed on the cooking of potatoes. Potatoes were considered ornamental decorative plants, And you write that the culture had been cooking them wrong until this moment. Frederick said it's okay to eat them. Couple questions. First, how are they cooking them wrong, and how did this change?
They actually weren't cooking them at all. They were
Oh,
ornamental. They were planting them. And one of the defining aspects of German food culture I learned while I was writing this book was that hunger really dominated the landscape for hundreds of years, unless you were a part of a sort of higher upper class. And so potatoes, well, first of all, they weren't part of the European landscape at all until the discovery of the New World. And then they were, in Germany, used as ornamental plantings at the royal palace. And Friedrich II is largely given
credit. Yeah.
credit for having sort of not only introduced potatoes into the German diet, but really forced Germans to start eating them. And I think this is just such a funny little anecdote, something that people associate potatoes so deeply with Germany. But actually, in the grand scheme of German history, potatoes have only been part of the German diet for the past 300 years, which isn't that long when you consider that the Germans have been eating similar foods to today 2,000 years ago.
Wow, that's a remarkable parallel, and now today potatoes play a massive role in the diet, and you have many recipes. Is it a matter of just the culture loves just doing amazing things with potatoes, or is there a deeper meaning to that?
Well, I think that potatoes were a cheap crop that quickly became a staple as soon as people realized that they could nourish themselves. It was certainly a step up from the gruel that they were eating before, the average German peasant, let's say. And potatoes are, full of nutrition, full of vitamins, minerals. And so they, I think, took on a pretty important role in the German diet. And nowadays, it's interesting. The regions of Germany are quite different when it comes to like the things that they're really obsessed with. So, for example, potatoes are considered more of a staple of the German diet in the east and in the north, whereas in the south, bread reigns supreme. So there's bread dumplings and all the sort of side dishes that are based around stale bread and how to use up bread, whereas in the north and east, Prussian, König Friedrich the Second was the king of Prussia. Potatoes are much more important.
Let's tap into that a little bit. I wanted to ask you about the regionality of Germany, and I think as a culture, and many of our listeners, we know France, we really know Italy. We might even know Spain. We know the different regions. We know Tuscan cuisine versus Sicilian. We know how Provence has a certain culture with olive oil, and of course, Paris in the north is not. So I want to ask you and paint the picture briefly. How does geography play a role with the cuisine? What is northern food? Is there a west-east? I mean, I'm really, really ignorant about the geography of Germany. I haven't been there. I haven't visited. So maybe that's a reason. But for our listeners, give us a little overview of how regions play.
So Germany, united Germany, let's say, the Germany of
we can
today,
start with that,
right,
yeah.
is a country that spans from Western Europe all the way well into Eastern Europe. I mean, Berlin is 80 kilometers from the Polish border, just to give you a sense of how wide it is. And it's the regions are quite different from one another. One of the things I really wanted to achieve in the book was to have a collection of recipes that Germans all over the country would recognize as being classics. And yet there are a lot of regional differences. So the potatoes play a role, the bread, the meats. And I would say that what ends up happening is that the influences from the north through the spice routes, and we're talking hundreds and hundreds of years ago, right? The spice routes brought cinnamon and saffron and all of these spices that end up becoming really important in the German diet. From the east come the pickles and cabbage and these kinds of sort of the foods that a Jewish American would recognize as Jewish food, but it's actually Eastern European and German food. From the southeast comes the massive, massive influence of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which really cannot be overstated because it has had, I think, the most influence on German cuisine. And then from Italy and France come the braises, the noodles, the long-cooked meats. So all of those influences sort of create the canon of German food today. But it is a pretty wide, it's potatoes are just one small aspect, just like sausages also that are just a small aspect of this larger cuisine.
But of course, in America, we think of German food in a very narrow lens. I feel Bavarian cuisine is probably how most Americans recognize. How do you address these misperceptions?
That is a very good point. So I would say that to the average American, Bavarian food is German food. When Americans think of German foods, they think of Biergarten and Oktoberfest and a big pork knuckle or a pretzel. And it's really important to point out that, for example, Berliners eat pretzels, but they're terrible. They're nothing like the pretzels in Bavaria or in Swabia. We don't even celebrate Oktoberfest. That's a purely Bavarian thing.
What are the cities of Bavaria so we know? Because we know these names and maybe we don't know the geography.
Munich is the most famous, and that's where I think I've read somewhere recently that Oktoberfest in Munich is the most traveled to European event.
I mean, have you checked out Munich TikTok?
No.
Right now, my algorithm has been hitting the Munich TikTok hard, where there's this like mad dash to get a table.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. No, Oktoberfest is next level.
Is it worth going to?
I confess, I have never been.
Okay, enough said.
I'm a Berliner, and so Berliners tend to look at all of this stuff with a bit of a gimlet eye.
We should get into your own personal history because you're obviously living in Berlin. You spent time in the States. What is your own personal background?
So I was born in Berlin. My mother's Italian from Rome and my father's American from Philadelphia. And they moved to Berlin kind of on a lark for a year. And that year turned into 2, 3. And eventually I was born. And when my parents split up, they made the unorthodox decision. My mother stayed in Berlin and my father and I moved to Boston. And so I grew up in Boston, but I would travel back and forth to see my mother all the time. So I was a frequent flyer at the age of 3. And Berlin always remained home. And when I was in 6th grade, then I moved back to live with my mother full time. So I've spent elementary school in Brookline, Massachusetts, and middle school and high school in Berlin.
Wow. And your language skills really must be an added just like it's almost like a superpower because you can probably float between these cultures. What's that like for you mentally? I use the word code switch, which has a negative connotation, but I think it's accurate. Like, what's that like to like be? I mean, you present as an American. I mean, you really do, and your accent is obviously very much American. But clearly, when you're in Germany, you present German. What's that like mentally for you?
That's such a good and emotional question for me. I think that it's complicated. I mean, I've read somewhere recently that people who are multilingual have a slightly different personality in every single language. And I think that there's something true to that. I mean, I can't imagine my life without these languages. I also speak French. I studied French and I lived in Paris. And my family, half of my maternal family lives in Belgium. When I read the book Third Culture Kids, that was the first time that anybody put in words what it felt like to be me. And I think it's obviously a very privileged thing, but it's a kind of lonely thing to be so fluent in different languages and have the people sitting across from you who aren't like you not really understand that there are all these other aspects of you or other sides to you that they will never be able to access, which is why I think I love living in Berlin so much, because Berlin is full of people like me, and always has been. It's sort of a strange place. It's really unique. It's kind of like a lot of people say New York isn't like the rest of the United States. Berlin isn't like the rest of Germany. It's its own special place, certainly because of its history and the division and the occupation by the Allied soldiers and the wall. But yeah.
Wow. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that. I think that's really powerful. And that book is meaningful. It's a really terrific book. I'm glad you referenced that. How does this kind of multicultural, multilingual worldview for you, how does that help your journalism and the writing that you do?
Well, I think that especially in the food world, Italians, for example, are such chauvinists about their food, right? Nothing is as good as an Italian meal. And I mean, that's what Italians think. And And I think that because of my background, I'm able to look at different foods and their cultures with a much more discerning eye because, I mean, yes, Italian food's amazing, but even after all of those delicious meals, eventually you're going to be hungry for some fish sauce or for some, Thai curry or something a little bit different than all that basil and olive oil. And my hope with this book, and I think with all of my books, but particularly these two German ones, is to give some attention and some respect back to a cuisine that I think is hugely influential. I think that German cooking and baking actually is the backbone for a lot more of American food and a lot more European foods than previously understood.
I mean, think of the immigration between 1900 and 1945. I mean, from Germany to America, and many different Germans moved to the United States for different reasons. And it clearly informs American cuisine in a deep way. And I'd love to read a longer work about German food in America. I'm just leading the witness a little bit there, but I want to zoom out a little bit and tap into that Bavaria topic because I think let's go over some just general misperceptions about German food that we will follow through in this book.
Okay, the number one biggest misperception, I would say, or maybe it's a misunderstanding even more, is that German food is all about meat. Certainly, meat plays a large role, but actually, Germans traditionally ate largely meatless because of the massive influence of the church, and because of poverty and hunger. And so there are a lot of vegetarian meals, not only in the book, but widely eaten throughout Germany. Another related misperception is because of people think that Germans eat these big, heavy, hot meals all the time. But the Germans are actually quite strict about eating only a hot meal at lunch, which is when you would eat at a canteen, whether it's in your school or your place of work. And at night, you eat Abendbrot, which is a concept that outside of Germany, nobody really knows. And within Germany, Germans can't comprehend that people outside don't know about it. So Abendbrot is just means dinner bread. And it's when you eat bread for dinner, open-faced sandwiches spread with butter, with some usually local salami or meat, or whether it's liverwurst or ham or whatever, or cheese or a fish if it's in the north. And then a light salad, cut up cucumbers, really light sort of.
And this is how you dine.
Yes, everybody eats like this.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the percentage, there's some statistic, I don't know, like 60% of Germans still eat Abendbrot at night.
Abendbrot?
Abendbrot.
Abendbrot. Now, I guess in modern Berlin, is there like a restaurant at night culture there, given that there's this deeply rooted tradition of eating lighter at dinner time? How does that play?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's amazing restaurants, incredible cooks and restaurateurs. Berlin's become such an exciting place for dining. No, I would say that the average person at home is eating Abendbrot, but if you go out, then you eat a proper meal.
Good to draw that a line there. Speaking of salad, I mean, a German chef once told me when I was reporting a story about how salad plays such a big role, and you have a great salad section. How does that work? Is it like more of like a farmer's market, leafy green salads? You think about Italy and the way salads play out, and I think that's quite regional. But how does the German salad play out on the plate?
Germans are obsessed with the concept of Rohkost, which means raw food, really. And it's considered to be a really important element of your digestive life to have a Rohkost every day. And Rohkost can be anything, fruit or vegetable, eaten raw, but it's largely means vegetables. And so salads, are really integral. People are eating them at lunch. There's always, like my husband he works at a German company where there's a canteen, and they'll all sit down together and
what a beautiful thing. like literally we'll have a lunch break.
Yes.
And that's the culture.
Yeah, absolutely. And you go to the canteen and there's hot meals there. And then everybody will get like a little dish of either shredded cabbage salad that's quite pungent, or a beet salad or green bean salad. And that's like, it's absolutely important to have that alongside whatever hot meal you're having.
Is this canteen good?
Yes, yes, canteen food is wonderful. I grew up with the school that I went to, the public school I went to, had a canteen like at many other schools, and the food was absolutely delicious. It was really traditional German food, and it was amazing.
It's Bertelsmann is our parent company here at Penguin Random House, so and I've met Germans here working at the company, lovely people, and it seems like the culture of work is very different in Germany, and we feel a little bit of that. One example is we get our holidays off and we shut down, and talk a little bit about how the holiday time plays out in Germany, maybe how work and life kind of work comes to a halt and life kind of takes over a little bit.
Yeah, I would say that there still really is a very sharp demarcation between when you're at work and when you're not at work. It's very untypical. In fact, I don't know anyone who is checking their emails after hours or working on weekends. It's just not done. Also, because unions are quite powerful
Yeah.
and it's just literally not allowed. It's illegal. And with regards to vacation, I mean, yeah, the Germans really insist and demand, and I think are entitled to their however many weeks a year it is. It kind of depends, but somewhere between 5 and 6 weeks a year. And Germans spend the most money on travel than any other European nation. They travel. They love to get on planes and go somewhere.
And they love to come to New York.
Yep. Yeah.
You're German spoken if you're in any corridor, any tourist destination, and wow, it's really pronounced. And what a culture, what a great facet baked into culture with travel being at the center of it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I used to scout for Random House Germany, and I visited them at their offices in Munich a couple times, and I've eaten in their canteen.
I would.
Why don't you guys have one?
We actually did have one.
You did?
We had a cafeteria here for years, and it was not what you described. We didn't have hot lunches like that, but I think there is something to be said about Bertelsmann kind of having German elements baked into our culture, and I can't say it's a bad thing. It's pretty great, actually. A couple recipes I want to cover. The chicken fricassee, I'm saying it in the 100% American way, and you can say the German word too. What are the German roots? You really say this is one of your favorite recipes in the book, and I love it. It's a great technique. You've got really solid recipe development skills in this book. These recipes are extremely cookable and approachable. I love that about them. But tell us a little bit more about this recipe.
So chicken fricassee, which in German is called Hühnerfrikassee, is basically a way of using up cooked chicken, or of course you can start it from scratch, but you basically extend the quantity of a chicken by bulking it out with a creamy white sauce and peas and carrots, and you can also add in seasonal vegetables, asparagus in spring or mushrooms, morels in the fall. And it's just one of these crowd-pleasing recipes that everybody loves. Children love it, grown-ups love it, old people, young people. And yeah, I don't know. It's one of the meals that I ate frequently at school, and the canteen at my school did a particularly good one, and I have a real soft spot for it. I really like it. And I was at a dinner a couple years ago when I was working on this book already, and I was talking to a woman across the table from me, and I was at that point I was really talking to everyone. Like, tell me about your favorite food. I want to know what your favorite German recipe was. And I had just finished testing chicken fricassee, and I told her about it, and she said, "Oh, we always ate in my family. We always ate chicken fricassee on New Year's Eve. It was our New Year's Eve celebratory meal." And I said, "Oh, really? Like with rice or noodles?" And the look on her face, she blanched. She was like, "No, obviously, we always ate it on buttered toast." With this outrage that I normally associate only with like Italians talking about like how you shouldn't put cheese on fish sauce or whatever. Yeah. And I thought that was just such a incredible little tidbit. I put it in the book.
I feel when you start talking about like traditional recipes in any culture, you're going to see a different side of somebody in a good way and maybe not. But
well, I will say that I think one of the things that's so endearing about German food is that Germans are a lot less doctrinaire than their French and Italian counterparts, for sure. They don't get sort of rude and uppity. They are sort of thrilled that people love the foods that they love. And if anything, I would say that Germans Germans suffer from a lot of insecurities about themselves and, you know, well-deserved or not, and but also about their food. And there was always sort of like a tender gleam in people's eyes when I would tell them that I was writing a book about classic German food. They'd be like, "But like your spin on it? No, no, the real
Yeah.
straight deal." Really?
I love that sentiment, and it really pours from the pages of the book. This connection with people, and you cite examples of visiting chefs and visiting home cooks and all that. Back to fricassee, you're talking about a boiled chicken that's pulled and kind of bulked up with a cream sauce with peas and morels. It sounds like the food of my homeland in the Midwest. It sounds like we instead maybe threw some cans of creamed soup instead of using a fresh cream, but wow, I mean, this is like familiar to me.
Yes. I mean, Hühnerfrikassee is the Ur chicken pot pie, just like Käsespätzle are the Ur mac and cheese. I mean, I do think that for comfort food in America, almost all of it can be traced back to German home cooking.
Yeah, you made that point in the beginning, and it strikes me just in this conversation how much German food is informing our food in America. It's really, really fascinating.
Yeah, and I mean, Jewish American food too, like matzo balls and chicken liver pate and pickles and all of that. That's all really
Yeah.
German flavors and German traditions.
I mean, Ashkenazi food is certainly informed by Germany and Poland
Yeah.
and other parts of Eastern Europe. I mean, of course, it's has a root there, and so many Jews lived in Germany, and we
Yeah.
can remember the war and, of course, the impact that had. And how do you negotiate these big topics in your book? The World War II, certainly, and you talked about briefly before about, this perception and maybe some insecurity of the German population. Only you can answer this question, so I'm very curious.
It's such a tricky line to toe. I have to be honest. It's tricky. I think it's really important to be honest and open and sort of not mince words. On the other hand, food is culture, and it's so hard to know exactly how to talk about food culture without looking at the broader picture. But in a way, I don't know, I think it's important. And I think that one can see the whole thing and sort of hold the whole thing in one's mind and still not discount all of it, all of the German culture. Because I think there's many aspects of German culture that are still important and beautiful and instructive, but there's just this terrible black mark on it forever, in my mind. So it's tricky.
You really you tackled that question really well, and you can answer it in a podcast. And I'm sure your writing is probably the best way. And I would say go back and read your books. I'm sure you address these topics in a written form. And but thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. It was an important question.
Thanks.
I want to ask you about Swabian meat and spinach dumplings. I just stopped on that page as a process image, and it looks like the most incredible, weekend project. Tell us a little bit about this part of Germany that maybe we don't know about.
So the recipe you're referring to are Maultaschen, and Swabia is a region of southern Germany that I think considers itself the cradle of German cuisine. Largely, southern Germany does have sort of the most delicious, the most interested food people, I would say. They're very passionate about their recipes. And Maultaschen are, I think, arguably some of the most beloved dishes in Swabia. They were originally conceived of, I mean, this is the myth. I don't know if it's absolutely true, but this is the story, the legend that's told. During the fasting time when you weren't supposed to be eating meat, an enterprising priest or monk, can't remember, decided to hide a little bit of ground meat in the spinach dumplings, and figuring that God wouldn't be able to see them if it was see the meat if it was
That's
layered
amazing.
into the spinach filling. And so the local dialect, I'm going to butcher this a little bit, is the name for them is Herrgottsbescheißerle, which means a trick,
Tricking
the
the
Lord,
gods.
tricking the gods, exactly. And they look quite complex, but actually they are not that hard to make. You make a pasta dough, pretty simple pasta dough, and you roll it out into a long strip, and then you make a mixture of spinach and onions with lots of different flavorings like nutmeg and marjoram, and you add in ground meat, and in traditionally you would also add in a little bit of bratwurst filling,
Mhm.
that also is highly seasoned, and then you kind of smear this mixture all over the pasta dough. You roll it up, and because the filling is quite solid, it doesn't leak, so you don't have to worry about pinching shut
Mhm.
like you would
You can
with a
just do knife cuts.
raviolo. You can just knife cut it, drop it into boiling broth, poach it, eat it with some vinegary potato salad and some beet salad on the side.
Ah, sounds lovely. It sounds like a recipe I'm going to tackle at home. I
Yes.
love that.
Yeah.
Talking a little bit about the sweets side and classic German baking is your last book, and please turn to that book. I mean, there's like much written about the baking side of Germany, but you talk about German chocolate pudding and almost how this is like a recipe you felt like maybe you would skip, but then you had some forces that said you had to include it. It's very fascinating that pudding and like your technique there is so classic.
Yeah, so I think the question you asked me at the beginning about the twinkly-eyed German approach, pudding, I should have answered that at the beginning. So one thing that a lot of people don't know about Germans is that they eat sweet meals as main courses. Um, and sweets in general or sugary things are really, really integrated into the food culture. It's not just something for kids. Everyone eats, whether it's a sweetened farina pudding or dumplings filled with jam or pancakes rolled up and eaten with powdered sugar. And chocolate pudding, I thought, well, who needs a recipe for chocolate pudding? But when I talked to my German friends about it, they all were sort of aghast that I would leave it out because it's so vanilla pudding and chocolate pudding are just like really, I don't know, they're important parts of the canon. And these puddings are not very rich. They're not made with cream. They're made with a cornstarch thickened milk, cooked milk, and a little bit of melted chocolate and an egg. Um, and so they're as nourishing as they are comforting. They're sort of nourishing
Yeah.
treats. Do you know what I mean?
No, definitely, and something that you could have during the hot lunch or at a light dinner if it slides in there pretty easily.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Do you like it?
Yes,
Do you
I
make
do.
it? You make
I do. But for whatever reason, my children don't have the pudding gene. They
yeah.
don't like pudding. And when my mother-in-law, who's German, makes Grießbrei, which is farina pudding, kind of a sweetened cream of wheat, which every single German I know is obsessed with. My kids are like, I don't know why. I guess the Italian or American genes
Yeah,
won out there.
we're dominant there. But I also go back to American culture, and this pudding recipe predates much of the immigration here. But I think some listeners probably assume that chocolate pudding is an American food. So yet another example of how Germany is influenced.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, could it be that the Americans brought it to Germany? I guess it could be, theoretically. I don't really know. But in any case, it's kind of like with Wiener Schnitzel or any of the Austrian, they've become such a part of the German canon that even though I give credit to the Austrians.
Talk a little bit more about this idea of sweets for dinner or part of the hot lunch, because you have a whole section in the book that addresses this, and it's really fascinating because it's pretty unique, I would say, in Europe to have this culture. You're not seeing this in Italy, for example.
No, I don't think Austria and Germany, I think the only countries in the world that I know of that eat sweet meals as a main course. And they are usually sort of bready meals. Like in this, there's a lot of like whether it's a pancakes filled with jam or steamed dumplings or cream of wheat with cherries on top, or even rice pudding. So Germans eat hot rice pudding as a meal rather than as a dessert or a snack. And yeah, it's just kind of one of those idiosyncrasies that
Yeah.
people outside don't really understand, but Germans are like, yes.
We often neglect the last recipe in a cookbook, but not here on our show. On page 248, you have a recipe that looks amazing. It's for stuffed baked apples with almond. Let's give it some props. What is this recipe?
So baked apples, you probably know about, but the German twist on baked apples is to fill them with a mixture of nuts and raisins and almond paste, or marzipan. And it just is a kind of luxurious little twist on something that I think a lot of people don't spend a lot of time thinking about, which is the baked apple. Um,
Mhm.
I love baked apples. I think that they're such a cozy, beautiful dessert, and they're quite unexpected. I mean, I think that they've fallen out of favor for a long time, but there's something so easy about them. You can make them in advance if you're having a dinner party, and it's ideally you would choose an apple that gets a little frothy in cooking so that you can eat the whole thing with a spoon, but almost any apple is delicious
Yeah.
when baked with butter and nuts and raisins and marzipan.
Marzipan in the middle, too. That feels like the ultimate twist, the surprise that you get. Because, baked apples definitely common in America. We do it. But, man, wow.
Well,
Marzipan.
it's funny because in Germany, the flavor profile of a baked apple, or baked apples in German are called Bratäpfel. It's kind of like pumpkin pie spice here.
Yeah.
So they're candles with Bratäpfel scent, or hand wash.
Yeah.
It's just kind of one of those
Very
beloved
cozy fall,
smells.
winter profile. Personal question. So my grandmother was born in Munich, moved to the United States as a young girl. But I wanted to ask you, an expert, about the food that my grandmother was likely eating in Munich in the 1920s, coming from, I would say, a wealthier Jewish family. I'd love to do a little cultural anthropology for my own sake, but I think it would be informative for our show.
Yeah, I mean, she was probably eating a lot of the things that are in this book. The cuisine has remained pretty stable over the past several hundred years. When you look back at antique cookbooks from the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, the recipes are all pretty recognizable. And I do have to give a shout out to a wonderful book called The German Jewish Cookbook, written by a mother-daughter duo, published a couple years ago, where I learned so much more about specifically German Jewish food culture, which is really quite separate from Eastern European Jewish food culture. And lots of really interesting little tidbits about how they ate and how similar it was, almost like it was running on a parallel track to German cooking, but with slight tweaks. For example, German Jews used goose fat rather than lard, because geese are kosher.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I'd love to check that book out. I remember seeing it released, but I never actually bought it. So I'm going to do that.
It's excellent.
Great tip. On This Is Taste, we ask guests about their discerning taste. So to close this interview, here's a little rapid fire, fast and furious taste check. Are you ready?
Yes.
The best fruit.
The best fruit is a fresh fig off the tree.
Where would you pluck that fig from in the world?
I'm lucky enough to be able to say my mother's house.
Oh, so how do you cook with it?
I don't. I literally eat them raw, standing underneath the tree.
That is a great feeling. The worst vegetable.
A rutabaga.
Ooh, yeah. Rutabagas.
I feel like they have no positive qualities.
Yeah. Write in if you have an example of.
I'm sorry if the rutabaga lobby is going to be angry.
Ooh, that would be a great interview. The rutabaga lobby in America. We're gonna get on that and maybe get their side. We're doing journalism here. We need to get both sides of the story. The best dessert, tough one. You've written books about desserts. The best dessert.
Oh my God, the best dessert is, I don't know, a delicious piece of chocolate. No, I think there was, an Italian gelato.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm not prepared for that.
That's okay.
Caught me off guard.
You've done all right. Those are two great choices. Your favorite city outside Germany to visit for food?
New York.
Very quick answer. Where are you going out in New York when you're here? Where do you like to go?
Okay, well, do you want me to tell you the truth? The truth is, one of the best meals I had here this week was a Chipotle bowl because, in my defense, there is no good Mexican, or there's hardly any good Mexican food in Berlin. And so, yes, I have to say that, which I realize will take me down a notch in the eyes of some gourmands out there, but that's okay.
Very, very. I really appreciate the truth here. Chipotle.
But of course, in New York, there are so many amazing restaurants, so many interesting things to discover, and just such I don't know, a free, full feeling to the food scene. It's very exciting.
Your favorite cookbook of all time?
The truth is, because I love cookbooks so much, I find this question incredibly difficult to answer because I think there are so many amazing books out there that really I find it hard to choose. But my mother's most used cookbook is one that I found the most useful over the long run, and that is Ada Boni's Il Talismano della Felicità, which is an Italian cookbook that I don't think has ever been translated. It's a doorstopper. It's like 1,900 pages long. Anyway.
It's the one with the most sauce stains. And is there one recipe in it that you can just recall that your mom makes?
She makes a stewed pea and calamari dish from that book. I mean, my mother only cooks from that book, so everything she makes comes from it. But the peas with calamari are pretty delicious.
Great memory there. Let me ask you a favorite recent cookbook discovery.
I really love Camilla Wynn's new book, which is called Nature's Candy.
Yeah.
To me, this is what great cookbooks should be about. Shining a light on a type of cooking or something that is just not well understood, or where you do need a little extra hand-holding.
Yeah.
And she's not only collected an amazing array of recipes, but she gets such joy, you can tell, out of them, and the joy that she feels comes through on the pages. And to me, that's what a great cookbook is all about.
Great words there. Because I know you love fiction, are there two books on the fiction side that you want to call out that you've enjoyed recently?
I mean, the book that I cannot stop thinking about, that has not let me go for the past couple of years, is Daniel Mason's North Woods.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a masterpiece. I could cry just thinking about it. It's such a special book. Food plays a very small role, the apple. The other book that I read this year and absolutely loved was The Bee Sting by Paul Murray. Very different from North Woods, but very good.
Last one, your favorite sandwich?
My favorite sandwich has to be a meatball sub. I have really fond memories when I was little, living in Boston with my dad. He would take me to this hole in the wall called Luigi's or Mario's, or I think Mario's maybe, and we would eat meatball subs. And it's something that doesn't exist in Germany, and they're like my rosebud.
Ah, what a memory. I'm so hungry listening to that. Luisa Weiss, thank you so much for joining This Is Taste.
Thank you for having me.
This Is Taste is hosted by Eliza Abarbanel and me, Matt Rodbar. The show is produced by Shalia Harris and Pat Stango and edited by Clayton Gumbert. Theme music by Steve Rydell. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter for updates on all cool things that are happening.